What if building a network on LinkedIn doesn't have to be about chasing followers and chasing connections? What if it's just about being curious enough to learn and being consistent enough to share what it is that you're learning? Welcome to Expert Insights, where we focus on healthcare, MedTech, business, and sales. Today, I caught up with Preston Alexander. Preston started in medical device sales, and since then, he's built a following of over 30,000 people based on his posts about healthcare. He's founded and sold a medical device company, and today he's nearly a year into his latest venture, /Health, helping practices understand how they run through their finances. What makes his story different and unique is how he started with a general vision to medical sales, work for 5 years, treat it like an education, and then go ahead and start his own business. Genuine curiosity, vulnerability, and some self-confidence took him from his first interview to today, where he is educating doctors and their practices through financial visibility, insights for them to make better decisions. Many people who live here in the Atlanta market go to Preston to get a sense of what's going on in healthcare because he continues to keep a pulse on the state of healthcare. Quick note, if you're trying to get into medical sales or know somebody who is, check out MedSales Blueprint at school.com/MedSalesBlueprint, SKOOL.com/MedSalesBlueprint. Follow, subscribe, comment, and even rate this podcast. I always welcome you to message me on LinkedIn with any questions or ideas for the next guest. And for more about Preston Alexander, find him on LinkedIn and check out /Health. Let's get into it. One thing I'm definitely curious of, how did you get all the followers that you got on LinkedIn, other than being cool? Is this something that you focused on over time and worked your way through? Or is there like one event that shot you to like 15,000 or something?
No, it was definitely like a slow burn. I never had like a super viral moment or anything. I think like there was probably one, maybe two times when I picked up like, in the hundreds of followers like in a day or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that those things happen anymore. LinkedIn has changed pretty dramatically, or maybe it's just me. Maybe people are just bored of my um inane ramblings. But no, it just like happened over time. It was so my LinkedIn story is actually vaguely interesting. So when I was like in medical device sales or product management specifically, it wasn't when I was in med device, there was this turning point when I realized like how little I knew about healthcare, and this desire to want to know more. And so I didn't really know how to go about doing that because I just sort of like, sat in my cubicle and marketed while like the salespeople were out, like actually talking to people in healthcare, but about one specific thing. So it's like I'll write stuff on LinkedIn. And so I basically would read articles about healthcare and do book reports on them, like on LinkedIn, like this article, blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't trying to get followers. I wasn't trying, like, I didn't even really know that was a thing. And LinkedIn wasn't even like that back then. It was all about connections. They didn't have follower counts. Like when that came around, that was like later on. This was in like 2017-ish that I started like doing this move. And it's because I wanted to learn. So I would write these book reports. If someone commented in there like, that's dumb, or like, what do you know? Or like, whatever. Like I wanted that to happen because then I would message them or comment back and like, hey, would you be open to a conversation? I'd really like to learn more about that. And it led me to connect with like healthcare leaders, doctors, nurses, administrators, et cetera. And I just started talking to people and understanding more and more about healthcare. And I did that for years. Like that was a long time period that I would just write and, kind of peppered some ideas in here and there, more like feelings than like well-formed whatever. But the goal was always, how can I throw something out so that like I can start a conversation so I can learn about healthcare. It was never to tell, it was never to teach, it was never to attract. It was like none of those things. Like I just wanted to learn. And then I don't know, 2021-ish, I was like, I have formed opinions about healthcare and what healthcare should be and look like. And now that I've
Yeah.
learned and experienced, et cetera, et cetera. And then I started writing more sort of like outwardly. And then it wasn't probably until like a couple years later that I was like, oh, wow, people are starting to listen. Like this is kind of building up. And then I was like, why don't I write a newsletter? Why don't I like try to actively get followers? So it was like a very long time frame And it wasn't about ever getting followers. It's not about getting followers. It's still sort of just about like putting valuable things out there and like hopefully it will change and help people like see healthcare differently and also
Yeah.
arming clinicians with like the business tools that they need to be independent. So yeah, that's the LinkedIn arc.
No, that's incredible. I mean, from curiosity and would you even say baiting people into conversation so that you could learn more, right? In a way?
In a way, I don't think I ever said anything like just sort of inflammatory just to like get people to
Right.
respond. But yeah, it was always like someone said like you're dumb and I was like interesting. Why am I dumb? Like,
Right.
please
Tell me
explain this
more.
to me. Like, respectfully, I don't agree with you, but like, I'd love to learn why. Like, would you be okay
Right.
with a phone call, 5 minutes or whatever? I mean, I talked to retired CFOs of hospitals and like, like people doing stuff, and it was really cool,
Yeah.
really illuminating.
If you've made it this far, go ahead and click subscribe now so you do not miss the next one. And if you or a friend want help breaking into medical sales, the best place to go is medsalesblueprint.com. And so you get to a point where you recognize that you have all these a good amount of followers and you've built yourself a network. How has that changed your progress through everything that you've to where you're at today? Like, do you think you would have gotten into what you're into now if you didn't if you hadn't done that, if you hadn't built that network? Has that network that you built helped you, giving you the confidence, giving you the network to start your own businesses, to promote yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think pretty unequivocally yes. Like everything, and I don't know exactly when the turn happened, but so if I look at the things now, right? This conversation, for example, Matt Hallmark obviously being the nexus for why we know each other. Matt Hallmark, my business partner, like all that started forward slash health with me, that I started forward slash health with, who now has a law firm that I help. None of that would have happened without LinkedIn. And in fact, I might be one of the worst marketers ever because like I only know how to market through LinkedIn and like talk to people and do whatever. But any customers we have on forward slash CFO, any ones that we ever had that we served through forward slash health was all came from either LinkedIn or a newsletter that I've written almost one with a 100% like accuracy on that. Like that's the
Mm.
channel. And it's been great and it's opened a lot of doors and it's led me to speaking engagements. It's led me to like meet friends like Seth Turnoff and, folks like that and learn a ton. So yeah, I mean, when you are out there sharing your ideas, engaging, adding value, it's just one of the easier ways to increase your surface area for luck. And it's, m- it just puts you in a place to say yes to opportunities that otherwise wouldn't have found you because that's what it's all about, finding the thing or the thing finding you.
Yeah. Having started MedSales Blueprint and this podcast and going from 15 years in medical sales to suddenly in this digital space and working to understand the different social medias, some of my posts will be a hit on TikTok and then no other platform, like no one cares about it on any other platform, whether it's due to algorithm or what people are looking for when they pull that up. And so for you, it just seems like, to me, you found where you do well, right, in LinkedIn. It fits you. But at the same time, I've seen you at like you said, Matt Hallmark's networking events, and you do well there too. And the reason I bring this up is because I've had clients and I have clients that I tell them to, get on LinkedIn and start connecting with people. And a lot of people are like, I don't know how, I don't know what to do. And it's just like, literally just comment on other people's stuff, right? If you don't have the confidence to post something yourself or you're not sure what to say, it's okay to say something wrong, right? And go ahead and be corrected. It's an open forum. I say, treat it like an industry event where everybody's have booths up, right? Like everybody has their own booth up, whether it's a company or a person, and people are just walking by mingling, to use it in that way. So now it's funny for someone who has was it over about 35,000 followers. Um, and you post on a regular basis, you have a plan and a approach to how you're posting. You, I've never you don't seem someone like who advocates and tells other people, "Hey, you should be posting, you should be networking on LinkedIn," or am I wrong? Do you advocate for it? Do you push people to go post and build a platform of their own?
I think it depends, like, but it never on LinkedIn. I mean, I probably have 1 or 2 posts out there like,
Yeah.
"Oh, you should this because that." I mean, there are instances, so I'll give you an example. I don't know, a couple months ago, I reached out to a physician in Atlanta. She's an independent orthopedic surgeon, just opened her own practice and posted something, and I just happened to really need an orthopedist for my elbow, which is super jacked up and feels like it's gonna explode at all times. Um, and so I just like went to her website and then like, scheduled an appointment. So those things happen. And again, it's sort of the surface area of luck. Like that's a person that I would know is sort of already there's some alignment because they post on LinkedIn, they're an independent physician, like about that person. So in a way, like I mean, I would advocate for it when it comes up. And it'll always depend on the person in the circumstance. My first advice to people, if we ever talk about social media, like I do think it's a great tool and awesome, but I tell people to find the medium that works for them because like if they hate it, no matter how powerful it is, it won't work because you'll just stop doing it. And one of the reasons that I like LinkedIn is because I like writing, despite getting the worst grades in English growing up ever. Um, I just enjoy doing it, but I don't really like recording a video of myself. I don't like taking pictures and posting pictures. Like you don't see a lot of pictures on my LinkedIn at all. Like I'm not doing a
Right.
selfie or doing this or doing that. And I think it's great and people like it and I wish, but if someone was like, Preston, you need to post pictures all the time, like I could maybe do it a little more on LinkedIn just because I'm like pretty well versed in doing that LinkedIn muscle. But again, it's comes back to most of my stuff is just written because I write and I like writing. If you don't like writing, don't do it because you're just gonna burn yourself out. Lean into what your strengths are. If you love being on video, you're like a video person, LinkedIn's great, but do a video or go to
Right.
TikTok or go to because LinkedIn's a professional platform, et cetera. If you're in medical sales, I mean, listen, there are doctors on LinkedIn. There's doctors on Instagram. There are doctors on TikTok. There are doctors on
Yeah.
Facebook. Like everybody's everywhere at this point in time. You don't have to focus on what platform. I'd say if you're ever starting, focus on the platform that's more native to you because that's the only way you're going to get consistent and then figure out how to expand.
Yeah. Well, that's great. There are different people posting their different styles. And to your point about how you started a podcast during COVID, you didn't enjoy the editing part of it, so you just let it go. Like that's not for you.
Yeah.
You're not going to break your head over something you don't enjoy. You found what suited you. Um, you like writing, so you went ahead and continued that. That makes sense. I think there's a mix of just testing out the waters a little bit to see if you enjoy it. And then if it's not for you, it's not for you. And like you said, if it works, it works. I kind of want to change directions here and ask you about where you're spending your time now. /health seems to be your main focus. Where are you spending most of your time? What's going on there?
Yeah. So that is, so I would say that I have two main focuses, and both are brought to you by myself and my business partner, Sarah Covington, who I'm sure you've seen around the LinkedIn's
Yeah.
before. So we have /health. /health is we have a platform called /CFO, basically a financial management insight platform for medical practices, and where it's typically very hard to see unit level CPT code profitability. We've created an engine that allows you to drill down, see profit by payer, by CPT code, things like that, and build up a P&L, see key financial insights and metrics that are usually really hard to determine, and get you out of sort of the mode of looking at collections at the end of the month and an overhead at the end of the month, and not having much of a tool set beyond that. So that's one big focus. So we work right now on distribution. How do we get more people to know that that exists? That's my job. And then we also have law firm. Well, Sarah owns a law firm. I work for her. It's soon to be launched. But I'll share it with you now. Underscore law. And, we work with both healthcare founders, whether that's physicians opening practices, whether it's digital health, health tech, all kind of manner of healthcare industry. And then we also work with other law firms, and we do MSO PC structuring, we do transactions, we do all kinds of different things on the law side. So she's practicing law and serving clients. I help, with the operation side on that. And then in forward/health, we're really in heavy marketing mode and getting the CFO platform out there.
Very cool. So a bit of a yin and yang between you and Sarah.
Yeah, for sure. She's definitely like the brains of the operation. I just set the meetings.
I think you're being modest, but so for forward/health, I took a look into your platform or on your website, and CPT level profitability and the reporting aspect of it seems to be, well, it's interesting to me. Now, I don't have a private practice to say, hey, you can see this anywhere, but it seems like it's a unique way to be able to look, it's a clean look into your what to expect, forecasting and understanding your finances in a world where reimbursements are all over the place. How can you figure out your P&L and predict your future? I feel like I'm promoting your thing, but I did do
Right
some
away.
homework there. But it makes complete sense. How, without giving too much away, but also helping me understand, is that the main focus? We help you predict your future so that you can plan better. How do you do that? Can you get into the minutia of that?
Yeah, like just in terms of how we like the math or like the
Yeah,
how
like
to
I
actually
guess
translate. What's the outcome?
yeah, what's the outcome
Yeah,
and what can customers, doctors, practices
yeah.
expect from something like this? And also for context and perspective, what are most sites using? What are they doing? And how does this
Yeah.
compare?
Yeah. All right. I'll start with the context and like some examples. So context is that most practices, um, and all manner of practices too. I'm not just talking about like Dr. Smith in his solo practice primary care. I'm
Uh-huh.
also talking about big ASC owning tens of millions of dollars annually, 9 surgeon practices.
Yeah.
What's normal is there's sort of two pieces to it that I always talk about thinking about. One is revenue cycle, so medical billing, basically. I saw a patient, I cut them open, the CPT code, sent to insurance, and if they're feeling generous today, they'll pay me in 24 days, whatever. And it's like, okay, that lives in like your EHR, denials and codes and coding, and like it lives over there. And there's analytics around it, right? Days in AR, net collection percent, denial rates, all this stuff. And it's important. You got to drill down. You got to understand the analytics there. So that's like one side. That's your cash inflow, the revenue of the practice. On the other side, you have your expense side. So maybe QuickBooks, maybe something real fancy like NetSuite, maybe just your receipts that you send to your CPA at the end of the month. Whatever the thing is, you have your expenses. In most businesses, it's actually pretty easy, right? You came into my store and you ordered a coffee and you paid me these days $4.50 for a coffee. And I know that that coffee cost me 50 cents to make. So I have my revenue 450 and I have my expenses 50 cents. Easy, right? I made $4. But in a medical practice, that's really difficult because you came in, I cut you, I billed with you. And then I'm like, I'm not sure what my contract rate, because it's been 15 years since I even looked at that kind of thing. I know I'll get paid for it. I think it should be around, whatever, $1,200, but like I'm not that sure. Plus, I don't really know what payer you are, whatever. So I'm just going to submit it and I'll find out kind of at the end of the month, maybe, because really I'm just going to see total collections at the end of the month. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
just cost me to do that. Like, I don't know, but I do have an office manager in an office and I do buy supplies, but all my expenses are like, whatever, 20K a month. But you don't know today I made this much revenue and I spend this much to deliver that revenue. So that's like the typical, and then you have all kinds of problems on the revenue side, right? Like I did all these services and I thought I'd collect I don't know, 50% off my charges, but this month I collected 45%. Why? Well, there's a billion reasons why. You had your payer mix shifted, your procedural mix shifted. It could just be a timing thing based on seasonality that shifted. You could be subject to sequestration where you weren't before. Like, there's so many reasons why, because you can even have payer mix shifts within a CPT code line. Are you collecting your patient balance? Like, there's all kinds of reasons. So there's just this sort of black box opacity when it comes to the finances of a practice. And that it comes from revenue cycle being um, very complicated. And you really only
Yeah.
see the input and the output. You have no, like, in between is so convoluted. And then you see the expenses, and they're over here, and revenue cycles over here. So you have cash that's coming in the door and cash that's going out the door, but they're not matched together. So,
Yeah.
the long-winded, that's the state of things. Um,
No, that was actually a really good impression of a doctor, I think,
Thank you.
as
I
he
do the
explains his practice.
Yeah. And yeah, like I said,
It's true.
large practices will get, into the month, two numbers, right? Here's your overhead for the month. Here are your cash collections.
Yeah.
And it's like, cool. A lot
Right.
of practices just kind of, hey, at the end of the month, hope there's more money than there was last month in the
Right.
bank account.
And they have key people in the office like a Mary and a Jacob that they rely on. Like, I trust them to keep the expenses low. They're gonna be calling the insurance company, making sure we get paid. I've been leaning on them for years. We're gonna be okay, sort of thing.
Right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Susie's been with me for 35 years and she's the best. And she is the best. But again,
Yeah.
that's the operation level is keep expenses low and make sure we get the money that we're owed, which is fine. But those are really big bands of things. Which expenses am I keeping low? Where should I be investing versus where should I be cutting? Am I overspending in this one particular area because it's not actually driving any revenue or profitability? Are there certain revenue areas that I am focused on that's spending a lot of my time that's actually negative profitability? And clinical always comes first, right? You're not going to just cut a service line and stop providing care to people just because it's less profitable, I would hope. Um, you can then say, for example, right? This is the future state. So I see that my, CPT code, whatever. So I cut you, whatever. I know it costs. I know that revenue should be from Humana, $1,100. And I know that I pay X amount for my implants, and I know my overhead is this, and then I know that it has this many RVUs. My time is worth this, my RVU rate. And so then I allocate all of those costs onto this CPT code. So now I know when you walk in the door on a Tuesday with Humana as your insurance company, my revenue for that procedure. Now, again, there are some estimates there. They're always going to be when you're paid later, but that's normal for every company. Is that my revenue is going to be $1,100 and my expenses for that are all allocated and whatever, and they're going to be $800. So I'm going to, profit $300 on this procedure. And now you know that information and you can say, and then you look at another code, another, maybe it's, a total knee versus like a partial knee. And then you're like doing tons of partial knees, but you realize that your partial knee margin is 20 points or 20%, but like everything else, your total practice margin is running at 40%. You're like, hang on a second. That means that your partial knees, though a bigger part of your business from a revenue perspective, is actually diluting your margin overall. So you're keeping less, but doing more, which is super
Yeah.
common in most practices. Not to say stop doing partial knees, but go and see why. Let's go look at the implant costs for the partial knees. Let's go look at my overhead and maybe the spend is just higher there for the right reasons and it will never be more profitable. But maybe also we can say this is a Humana problem, not a Cigna problem. And then maybe we say, well, when's the last time we negotiated with Humana? Well, let's go get the contract. And then we say, we don't even have the contract. And then so you go get it and you look at your rates and you're like, this doesn't make any sense because every other payer is 25% more, right? So you can start to diagnose the financial issues or opportunities in the practice and then go actually do something about them versus saying, I'm working as hard as I've ever worked and I'm not making, I'm making the same amount of money or not making any more money, or now I'm making less money and not knowing why. Because
Mhm.
you have a black box over here and expenses you try to keep low over here, and you don't know how they work together.
Okay. So yeah, utilizing the analytics to bring up the truth in what's really going on, as opposed to the touch and feel of, I really think we should hire another support staff member, rather than knowing the analytics and all that. It's like, in fact, what we should be doing is spending less on this type of equipment, more on this type of an individual. If we're looking to bring on another physician, it should be this type because of the margins, or maybe the margins doesn't matter. Maybe they're more concerned about, whatever it may be. But with the data and analytics they're getting back, they can make better decisions. Um, with that said, what seems to be like the number one, two, three things that are like, hey, you get integrated, you get the data, you get running, and it's like, look, hey, these things always pop up. Like, this is where you can improve. And are you acting as a consultant after you have this data? Or is it, look, here's the data, we'll train one person up on how to read it, and then you go on your own?
Yeah. So right now it's more like, here's the platform, go forth and prosper. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we started off as consultants, so certainly it will be some sort of formalized offer, but we are available to do consulting after the fact. Because yeah, one part of it is great. Now I can finally see this picture. The other part of it is, well, now what? I see all this information. What should I do about it? Those are the operational changes. That's how do you expand the margin? How do you keep the upside? How do you,
Mm-hmm.
take the information that we've given you and and utilize it versus just saying like, cool, now I know that my practice is running on a 38% margin or whatever. So yeah, that is a big piece of it. And yeah, I think the thing that pops up and what we would commonly see and what people are taken by in it is the profitability and how we match up expenses and allocate them and by location. And so you can actually see, and it works for ASCs too, because we pull in the data, we look at place of service. And so if you want to see how profitable your ASC is, then you can see it very plainly. And it's not to say you can't do those things, but you can only do those things with someone who's pretty adept at Excel, has a handle on the numbers, and spends most of their
Yeah.
day looking at these different types of reports. And then do you want a spreadsheet, someone to send you a spreadsheet? And it's, hey, look at this. And you're like, okay, I don't know. Is the number at the end bigger? Great. And not really seeing and understanding it in this like very holistic, finance focused way. And then the other part is the sort of the cash forecast and budgeting tool that we built in there. So we do look at a rolling 13-week cash forecast based on historical trends, seasonality, when cash came in the door, what you're spending on, cash going out the door. So that's your point when someone says, hey, this like feel, I think we need to hire someone. And you look at the numbers and you say, I think you're right, we do, but we probably should wait because we're kind of expecting a cash crunch in 6 weeks. And if we
Mm.
come across this cash crunch and we hire someone and they're on an X amount ramp up period because of credentialing or whatever else, then we're going to really exacerbate this cash crunch and we don't actually have enough money in the bank. I don't want to draw on our line of credit to hire a person right now. Let's just do what we can. Can we do operational shifts and let's push this out until like week 7? Or you say, oh, great, no, it'll take that long anyways. Let's just start the search now. Hire date's going to be on whatever. So you start to have that level of insight versus, hey, I think we had a great month. Let me take a distribution. And then next month you realize you're short on payroll and you got to draw your line of credit. And then that's, interest fees or whatever else to cover practice expenses.
So is this only for surgery centers, or is it all sorts of outpatient, like imaging centers and
Yeah,
clinics? And
any outpatient that's running CPT codes, and we work, J codes too. So if you're doing drugs or infusions, things like that, it works. The goal was, we want to support physician ownership and practices and independence. So from a single doc primary care practice to a 47 doc, multi-specialty, 2 ASC location, big shop. They both
yeah,
get the tool and it shows them the same level of insights for both of them.
I've seen a number of, over the last few months, I've actually spoken to for all different sorts of reasons, software, SaaS companies in healthcare. Um, and whether it's medical equipment, whether it's scheduling, staffing, um, or on the financial side, operation side, it's getting this data and being able to provide back like the not just the analytics, but helping them make better decisions, right? And in the simplest form. When I see yours and helping people be able to forecast, that's in like just as important as helping them understand, hey, this is what's going on today, but now you can make better decisions with your tomorrow with hard numbers or with hard facts. And you can change that based on the information that you have. So to me, uh, it makes complete sense. But again, I don't have reference point. I don't. So your explanation of what these facilities have been doing compared to what they can have is actually
Yeah.
pretty stark.
Yeah. They're actually, that's the thing. I mean, not to say there aren't similar-ish types of things out there, but like there isn't a lot of reference point because it's not easy to do. I mean, there's some people who do it manually, but it's really easy. People practices take uh, like a accounting perspective, like a tax accounting perspective, right? They have a
Yeah.
CPA, and the CPA is thinking in terms of tax season. Is this in line with taxes? So they all work on a cash-based accounting system, which is the right answer for a medical practice for taxes, because you don't want to. Otherwise, you'd be accruing revenue and then paying taxes on dollars you haven't collected yet, and you don't want to do that. I mean, you get trued up later on, but you're going to be paying a tax liability that you don't necessarily owe. So if you just do it on a cash basis, it's like cash in, cash out. Like we'll see
Yeah.
a lot of private practices will just hold claims at the end of the year because it'll reduce their tax liability. If you're doing it on an accrual basis, that wouldn't work because date of service, you recognize your revenue and like that's what you're taxed on. So, but the accountant is just saying cash in, cash out. I mean, there's subtlety there. I don't mean to make an
Yeah.
accountant
Yeah.
seem like they're not hyper valuable. They are. But it becomes the default internal financial lens,
Yeah.
and it becomes about these sort of just like how's the cash moving, and it's so we're not talking taxes, we're talking financial management, managerial accounting. We're talking about
Yeah.
how do you look at the finances that's going to let you make operational changes, negotiation changes, those sorts of things to have a more financially successful practice.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot to compare to because that's how it's works, and most people think the finance is just let's spend less or just what we have to and let's focus on revenue cycle, but there's more to it than that.
I think there's a few industries that find themselves used to having so much complexity that you lose focus on the fact like, hey, it shouldn't be this way, but this is the way it is. This is the way it's always been, and we've made it this far. That's fine. So getting people to shift away from it's not even shifting away. It's from recognizing, hey, it's like being in some sort of abusive relationship, and it's like you're just freaking used to it. But I will say, now that you're done trashing on accountants, I will. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. No, there, but 100%. There's tons of value to it. I've been educating myself a lot more on private equity, so I'm going to
Mm.
mention that word, which a lot of people either perk up and want to hear about it, and some people just hate private equity for whatever reason. One thing I do know is that private equity really does zone in on the numbers of the day to day of the business to be able to forecast for the future. Whether a private practice wants to sell to private equity or not, it is probably best to fully understand what you're doing. So let's take a good practice from private equity, these businesses who 5x the revenue of a business in just a small amount of time. Let's not discuss like what they do to the culture of the business and all that stuff. But the way that they do that is that they look at all the numbers, they understand what's going in, what's going out. How can we be efficient financially with our time, with our people, with our expenses, etc., so that we can run a profitable business or get to profitable or multiply our profits. We can't do that if we don't know what it is. So the garbage in, garbage out sort of thing. Um, let's get the right data so that we can make the best decision possible. I don't know. Do the facilities that you work with have general goals, or is it just hey, we'd love to know where we're at so we can just be run a little bit leaner or be better?
Yeah, I think it depends. We really see it bifurcate, and maybe there's a three three lanes that this falls into, which again, healthcare, and as someone who works in healthcare and sees it, I think that healthcare fancies itself just wildly different than any other industry. And in some ways that's true, but in some ways it's not true. I mean, most businesses probably fall into these three things also. It's in any business. It's we're not doing great, and we need to, and I want to, and I don't know how, or I don't know what's going on. We're doing
Yeah,
fine, and I don't really know why. It's just that things are working, so whatever. Or we focus on the business, and we're doing well, and we want to keep doing well, and we're going to get after this. And those clinicians, I think that we as non-clinicians often sort of have this a bit of a narrative that maybe we project, and there's some truth to it, but it's sort of the focus on just the clinical and patient outcomes and that thing, and just ignore the business. Like, you shouldn't think about money, and you should feel guilty if you think this way, whatever. Um, but interestingly, some of the best clinicians, practitioners, surgeons that I know and have ever met are also running the best businesses that I've seen in terms of running medical practices. They're not turning patients away. They're not cutting their staff. It's not a terrible place to work. They're not providing substandard care. They're providing the highest level and the best care, and they're also the most profitable. So I think like
yeah,
we can kind of dribble into this sort of narrative, and I try to you know, get out of it. It can be used against clinicians, certainly more in like an employed and like hospital sense, but less so in private practice, because you are ultimately running a business and it is important, but you can
yeah.
do both. And I find that one, like the business sort of follows from excellence in clinical care, so long as you look at them as they relate to each other, but can separate them and have two separate kind of minds about it at the same time.
Right. That's a really good point. I guess the those general to your point, those generally speaking, those who are um conscious of the details and aware of the details and can make better decisions are the ones that are making overall the best decisions for the practice, right? So to your point, it just because if a surgeon's doing well financially and the practice is doing great, it it doesn't have to fall into this category of capitalistic greed. It's um strong decision making and optimizing. And somebody who's into optimizing and making the best decision is probably doing that in every aspect of their business, whether it's the patient care side or making sure that the lights are on and that they're running efficiently and maybe they turn off when no one's in the room, right? Like they're just making the best decisions possible. Interesting. So, um, with that, segueing into, excuse me, segueing into like where healthcare is today and where it's going. Do you have a general perspective on that? Is there anything that you're seeing or anticipating in overall healthcare, in the outpatient setting, et
Yeah.
cetera?
So many things. This is its own, yeah.
Yeah.
But from where we sit and where we work, I think one of the biggest things that is going to shift is I think a push back to independence, and whether that means physicians directly owning practices, but at least some level of sort of redirecting the sort of seat and source at the clinician level and like the physicians versus just being so financially focused, because we're seeing all these wild implosions, like private equities losing billions on deals, which to them honestly is a drop in the bucket when they manage trillions of dollars, and it's like, oh, it didn't really work out, who cares, they already extracted as much as they wanted to from it anyways, different kind of thing. But yeah, so I think that's gonna be an interesting shift to watch. Like, my wife today went to the doctor, and her doctor is leaving this group to start her own practice. and we're seeing kind of that more and more,
Wow.
is that while, it's hard, we still see practices that do incredibly well. Obviously direct primary care is gaining increasing momentum. Um, and that is tied well in with, self-funded employer sponsored healthcare. And I think those are going to be the major positive shifts that we see. We have changes in fee schedule, so they're eliminating the inpatient only procedure list. So we're going to see a huge ownership shift in ASCs. We've already seen some big moves from large health systems buying huge ASC chains, and so it really is an opportunity for physicians to start owning more of it again. Obviously everyone follows Mark Cuban on LinkedIn these days and how he talks about PBM reform. And a lot of that does again stem from self-funded employer plans because they control their own dollars. And then direct primary care is less expensive and you have more access. So I think that there are a lot of great trends happening, and I'm sort of bullish on the future. I do think the future is going to take a really, really long time to get here at a critical mass.
Yeah.
It's going to, revamp the healthcare system. Those shifts I watch and talk about because people always ask, like, wow, Preston, you're a real fun dinner date, always talking about what's wrong with healthcare. What's actually good about it? And those are the things that I point to most often. I'm not that into consumerization in healthcare, to be honest. I think that there's certain things, sure, you can go shop for an MRI because your knee's bothering you and pay $400 versus $1,200 at the academic medical center. But you're not shopping for a heart attack. If you're in extreme pain and you can't function, maybe you're going to get a second opinion, but you just want to be able to go to a doctor and they're going to tell you to do a thing. You're going to like do a thing. Consumerism, I think, only goes so far.
Yeah.
GLP-1s and such, we're just seeing that kind of consumerism piece sort of be, uh, I don't know. We're sort of marketing to the humans more baser instincts. I think we saw an ad recently that was like GLP-1 pills. You don't have to be overweight. It can work whether you're a size 2 or a size 6. And I'm like, what in the world? It's become the new diet pill in a way, but
Yeah.
things still have a ton of value if delivered right. So consumerism is just going to be so all over the place, I think, in healthcare. So that's one that I think people are bullish on, but I don't find to be that particularly transformative in healthcare.
Yeah. The GLP-1 peptide uh pre- preemptive care, wellness, longevity. I don't see that in the same world as the healthcare space. Obviously, they play a role in one another, but I think you're right. It's the consumerism of it, right? I I think there's a vast difference between someone or something that markets directly to the patient on a commercial during the Super Bowl or World Baseball
Yeah.
Classic or something, right? And there's a famous tennis player as their whatever versus acute care, outpatient setting, or inpatient setting, um, that world in itself where it's all about reimbursements and whether it's value-based pay or et cetera, like that world is very different. And you're bullish on it. You're bullish on it right now, generally speaking, at least on the inpatient side. The independence of surgeons and their power is reemerging. This is the third person I've had on that's saying that. You are the third person. Maybe I need to have someone from the inpatient facilities come on and maybe tell me differently, or maybe are they not being affected? I did speak with a CFO of an inpatient facility that he will go unnamed, and I asked, like, are you feeling the effects of more people going to surgery centers, more surgery going out there? And he goes, honestly, it's not that big of an impact to us. Now maybe it's his site, or maybe it's just that like the dollar value, it's just a drop in the bucket.
Well, so there's a lot at play there. And I think the inpatient needs a little bit of a reckoning, but that's honestly in some ways there's a couple of things functioning there. One, obviously, there's overcharges and there's it's way more expensive No, and there's a lot of different reasons for why it's just more expensive to operate, so it ends up being more expensive because it's sort of a cost
Centers.
plus model in some way. And the way that insurance works, which it shouldn't arguably, is based on leverage, so that, Emory in Atlanta is going to command much higher rates because they have, the market cornered on cancer care in Atlanta. Or Northside is going to command super high rates because of their imaging reach and their labor and delivery center. So there it is because of market capture, but arguably, United Healthcare should pay Dr. Stevens in rural Alabama to do a thing, the exact same amount that he pays, Dr. Allen in, Manhattan for doing the exact same work. And I mean, one could argue the differences in, cost of
Cost of
living, et
living.
cetera. But sure, you take that into account, and why wouldn't we just have, because just because someone does way more, it's almost a weird inverse relationship, right? In manufacturing, the more I produce, the like less expensive it is. But in services,
Right.
the more I do and the better I am, the more expensive it is. And insurance companies don't actually care about better. They just care about, are you going to leave our network? Because like we want patient lives. And if you leave our network and you have the most patients, we become less valuable. So we'll pay you more to keep more patients in our network. So it becomes a game of leverage. And big hospitals and insurance companies are constantly levering up, and costs are just going to go up and up and up. Now, there that's our costs, but costs in the hospital also continue to climb. So there is uh, an issue there. But to your point about, things shifting to outpatient and like if a hospital CFO, I think that might be more circumstantial. Um, Most health systems are going to talk about like the crunch. And I mean, Medicare Advantage is a terrible payer and they're doing terrible things and denials and stuff. And it's not good for a hospital. So it's hard to, again, it can be its whole own discussion about health system and hospital finance because we need the hospitals for sure. Do they need to be as extensive and expensive? And is it all about market control and should it be about consolidation? No, but we've also asked them to um, sort of fight with for profit largest companies in the world to get paid for the services they provide who are incentivized not to pay. And we've also asked them to simultaneously produce a public good, which is providing healthcare, while also then suggesting that maybe they should grow and they should, they have to issue bonds if they want to build a new wing to serve patients or whatever. The government's not building a new surgery suite for a hospital to meet demand. They're building it themselves.
Yeah.
They have to raise bonds to do that. And a bond is an investment vehicle. Just because you're a nonprofit doesn't mean you don't have investors that you're beholden to. I mean, they're bondholders, right? They're debt holders, but the bond ratings are based on market share. They're based on revenue. They're only based on financial metrics because it's an instrument. So we have this weird amalgamated system that's sort of like public good, but private enterprise, but profit, focus, et cetera. So it creates these really crazy dynamics that we all now see and how it plays out. But I know there's a little bit sort of off track in your original question. So I think inpatient, it is the still the in terms of care delivery, it's still the 800-pound gorilla for sure. It's still the juggernaut. It's still they have the resources. These are big, huge things. Like Kaiser makes more, revenue than Walt Disney does. You know what I mean? Like these are big, big entities. Um,
Yeah.
and they would be Fortune 500 companies, a significant amount of them, if they were for-profit enterprises. And so, what kind of shift and reckoning will happen eventually? I think that time will tell, but I do think there are pressures on hospitals for sure, especially in rural communities, single site hospitals that don't have
Yeah.
delivery, that don't have the, specialty focus, that can't get high rates. But again, why United Healthcare pays one hospital $200 for the exact same thing that a hospital in a rural area gets paid $80 and loses money on? That's a fundamental crux of the issue that
Yeah.
hospital health systems and healthcare in general face.
That's a perfect example of it, right? And those rural facilities, RIP. Now they've merged with, or they've kind of disappeared. I feel like they were stuck in a between a rock and a hard spot. Maybe I'm naive, but I think it's pretty obvious that the incentives um, and what was allowed over the last 10, 15 years forced larger hospital systems to get larger, to consolidate, to grow in order to respond to what was put into play, um, value-based care and getting reimbursed, et cetera. Um, in order for them to to find their success, it was to grow and being allowed to. And I'm not going to be conspiratorial and say like, well, maybe they were in, that there was incentive behind the rulings and the changes and the adjustments for them to do that. But I don't know enough to go down that path. I will say where we are today, it is, from my perspective, the individuals that I see and that I work with on a regular basis, to know that they have power going back into their hands. I mean, the clinicians, and then to know that patients have different options, not just having to go to hospitals, but going to wonderful um, outpatient settings that they'll be treated great, if not better, depending on what's in front of them in their city or in their areas. So, and then not all of it having to be owned by private equity or being a part of a system, but knowing the individuals that you're working with. Patients can get the best of both worlds in the sense that they're getting this great care, but also not feeling like one of 1,000 that day, which always is the case, but not as much as it used to be. So that's my take on it in terms of like me being bullish on the way things are going, um, both on the patient side and the individual ownership of what they're doing, and not just being a cog in the wheel. Shifting the combo, you started in the medical, you started on the vendor side. My question to you is, how'd you get in? Why'd you get in? What intrigued you? Did you stumble in? Did you come in with intention? And then as you moved on to starting your own businesses, like walk me through that through the lens of people might be listening that are interested in getting into medical sales or early on in medical sales.
Yeah. So total accident, if I'm being
You
honest,
too?
which is yeah, which is not like I'm happy to share that. So this was 2013 or so, whatever. I I went back to school and got an MBA. Before that, I did a whole lot of interesting things, but none to do with healthcare whatsoever. The most I knew about healthcare was that I was about to go off my parents' insurance plans about it. And so in 2000, so I graduated with an MBA in 2015. And before graduation, I just started applying to every single job I could find. Um, because it was time. It was time for a corporate kind of job, whatever. But interestingly enough, or not interestingly, just by happenstance, before I graduated, I had this plan. So my plan was this wasn't exactly my plan, but the cliff notes are I was going to go work somewhere for 5 years and then I was going to start a company. Like, that was the thing in my head. 5 year work, MBA, 5 years work, go start a company. Um, and through all of these different applications, I happened to get an interview at a company in their surgical division. I use air quotes because when I talked to the recruiter, I said, "What does that mean?" And he goes, "Honestly, I don't really know. It was an acquisition, and we're not really sure because it was broadly a very different company than the surgical division that got bought." And so I was like, "Okay, that's not helpful at all. How do you prepare for an interview like that?" So, anyways, I walk in the interview, and it's for a assistant or well, I don't even marketing associate job. So like the lowest level of the marketing food chain in med device. Typically, that's like in a assistant marketer or marketing associate, whatever. Um, and I was like, hey, this is gonna maybe sound bad, but I didn't get a lot of information. Like, what do you guys do here? Like, what is this? And they're like, we sell surgical drapes. And they're like patient drapes, equipment drapes. And I was like, cool, that's super interesting. What's an equipment drape? And they were like, oh, they explained it. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Why do you need that? What's that for? What literally, I had no clue what an equipment drape was, what it was for, what a sterile environment, like nothing. Um, through their through terrible judgment, I guess, they hired me, and I started in product management. And day one, they said, "Hey, Preston, here's a $3.5 million portfolio. It's yours now. Go manage it and make sure it doesn't collapse." I was like, "That's it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know. Come back with questions. Figure it out. You're fine." And that was the company, and which is cool because like that was the culture. It was like very entrepreneurial. So if I decided
Mm,
I wanted to try something, they were like, "What's the business case?" And I'd say, "This is a business case." And they'd say, "All right, that sounds good. Go figure it out. Go do it." And so I just got to do things. I built international partnerships with some of the largest OEMs in the world because in equipment draping, if you don't have new equipment to drape, you're doing is fighting the competition, right? So how do
yeah,
you get new opportunities? Well, you partner with the OEMs and you become an exclusive drape provider for whatever thing that they have that's coming down the pipeline. We got to build that relationship. You have to have dedicated R&D resource. So they were like, "This sounds great. Go do it." And I just got to go and do it. So I was super fortunate because I had that sort of entrepreneurial to me. And it was a really like flat organization in this like division. So I was talking to our VP of finance. I'd help negotiate GPO contracts. I would be directly doing, national sales meetings, trainings. I would go
wow,
to customers. I would work with R&D, bring new products to market, do customer voice of customer work, like everything. I work with regulatory. Like if we had a recall, like we dealt with it. We did the whole nine yards. And then I went to another med device company, and there was much more downstream marketing, which actually sort of was the most boring thing ever. Just like decks and like, creating materials for like the sales team, which is great. I'm like all about enablement, but if I had to update one more PowerPoint slide, I was gonna freaking jump off a building. So I was like, let me think about this company that I eventually wanted to start. So, long story short, I started my first med device job in March or something, April 2015, and I launched my med device company in February 2020, which is its own story because if you remember what happened in February 2020, that was great timing. But
yeah.
5 years later, and I started a med device company, and that was a whole different ball of wax. But it was just an accident, and then I got in there, and I was like, I love this. This is so interesting. It's so convoluted, it's confusing, it's challenging, but it's important. It matters to people. I like manufacturing and like doing things, and I liked being an entrepreneur, like going and making deals happen and coming up with like value added things out of nowhere that would be create win wins around the board, and it was
Yeah.
fun. The business was fun.
Are you familiar with the term intrapreneurial?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So, an entrepreneur within the business, being housed within having the resources, but it's like go get it, go do it
yeah.
yourself, figure it out.
And I think that that's like a huge so people think I think that becoming an entrepreneur these days is like it's the new I want to grow up and be like a rock star. Maybe people want to be like YouTubers or something, but also being an
Yeah.
entrepreneur seems really cool. And I'll tell you what, just like being a rock star, it seems really cool, but it's also really, really hard. Um, and so what I would typically like recommend, especially knowing if people are trying to get into med sales and stuff, but if they sort of have this inkling that one day I want to start a company or maybe like I'm just going to go ahead and do it now, having a job, one in and of itself, not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination. And two, someone's paying you to learn something is a whole different way to look at it. If you walk into your job and you say, I'm going to do the best I can and I'm going to perform and I'm going to bring value, it's all amazing. Do that for sure. But also you can think of it in terms of I'm getting a salary to also learn a ton and to sharpen my skills and to hone in what I know about things and to improve myself so that when you come out of it or when you make a decision or if you want flexibility 10 years down the road, someone just paid you for a 10-year education, like trial
Yes.
by fire education. And, when you're in those positions, yeah, do great at your role, do great at your job, but go outside of it. Volunteer to be on the special project, whatever. Call up the product manager who's willing to talk to you and when they're always willing to talk to you. Go try to spend time with the finance function. Go hang out with the controller. Go all over, like go talk to R&D. Try to be someone who like they call because they have questions. Like get as much broad perspective because again, someone is literally paying you to just have access to learn as much as possible about business and about your industry and about things to do, things not to do, things like that. So I think entrepreneurship is the like one of the best starting points for entrepreneurship because someone's paying you for your business education.
That's a game changer in the way if someone changes the way that they look at it in that way, you're surrounded by experts who are willing to give you their information. Like you said, they're willing to pay for your life, right? So you're getting paid as opposed to going to school and having debt. Yeah, you do have responsibilities and expectations, but that's also it's almost like your homework or you want more responsibility. The more responsibility you get is just like taking another class, like something else that you're going to be able to learn. And then to your point in medical sales, so few people know about it. There's so little for you to be able to learn on your own in terms of what to expect once you get in. Once you get in, you're just kind of thrown into the ocean and the waves are taking you, and it's just like, hold on. Um, I think it's funny what you said about how your first interview went, and you were like, "What's that? I have no clue." But at the same time, I'm sure that they saw certain things in you to give you the responsibility of like, "Hey, we trust that at some point you're going to be good and you're going to go run with this." What might it have been that they have seen, or do you have any advice on how to handle, or what would you do differently now that you know what you know in an interview?
That's a great question. Honestly, I have no idea. It was a long time ago. Obviously, it was like, over
Yeah.
10 years ago. And I do remember like sitting there in the interview, but I think that, part of it, and I've been in this position a bunch of times. I think we all have in a meeting or when we're trying to figure out a deal with somebody that we're working with or we're trying something on our own. We're just like, you get this feeling of like, I don't know what to say, right? I don't, let me wait for someone else to make a move because like this is new for me. I don't know
Mm.
question, but it's like a dumb question. Like I just don't want to say anything. So we don't say anything. And I think that perhaps some of what was good about going into an interview, having no clue what anything was that I was genuinely curious. What is going on here? And, admitting that I don't know things and
Yeah.
then just asking even like the basic questions because it's not really about the basic question. The basic question is just a means to get information. Information is available anyway. If the recruiter had known what they had done, I could have Googled it and I'd have gone in there and I've been like, quick and trades, cool, whatever. But
Right.
then they gave me that information and then I could ask more questions and then more questions and then start to formulate and like tie things together and like bring it around. The idea that there are no dumb questions, I
Well
mean, is
said.
really accurate and true. And I think that being in that situation or any situation is don't ever be afraid to ask what you think is a dumb question or, be afraid to speak up, even if you're like, I have no idea what's going on. I remember sitting in a conference room one time. We were trying to do a deal between these two organizations. It was my organization. I had brought this external thing in. My idea was that it was in the wound care space. My idea was that, you know, WOC nurses are just in hospitals and it's really hard to scale education because if there's one in a hospital and, 80 patients need the WOC nurse, like the bedside nurses have to deal with a lot of wounds and it creates a lot of problems and whatever. It's really hard to scale knowledge and like disseminate it in like a useful way. Well, this company had sort of like a telehealth platform, and I was like, yeah, it's really cool that they can like one to one, but what this is really your availability to scale knowledge and application because if you could then have this company and it really is now like a more modern it's like you have the expert centralized and you have the person delivering care. And so the nurse at the bedside is like, hey, I got this patient, da 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 da. What do I do? And then they can like say, this is what you do. And this is, how you whatever. So you're scaling
Yeah.
this knowledge. And I just remember sitting, that was my idea. There was more to it, but I was sitting in this room and you could tell that this side of the table wanted to work together and like this side of the table wanted to work together, but they didn't quite know how to like make it happen, right? But you also got the feeling that everyone was afraid to sort of admit it. That they didn't
Yeah.
really know how
Yeah.
to, But imagine if someone sat there and was like, man, I love this. This is cool. But like, I don't know how we work together. How
Yeah.
does this make sense? How do you benefit and make money? How do we benefit and make money? And how do we help the patient? Like, what does this look like? Which seems kind of like a dumb question, right? Because I'm a smart executive guy. I should know and I should have the idea. But what if you just said, we're all sitting here, we all want to work together, but we're not sure how to make that happen? Do you have any ideas?
Yes. Yes.
Like it moves the needle. It's like, just don't be afraid and just talk, just ask, just put
Hmm.
together, throw a stupid idea out. Like, this might be ridiculous. What about this? And people are like, that's not ridiculous, right? They start to consider it. So I think that's a
Yeah.
huge learning that I've had over the years is watching other people who are super successful. They just, with the information, with their knowledge, with their skill, they make the decisions and they go with it. And then if they meet someone who gives them a better idea, thought, barrier, whatever, they change and adapt. And they start, they just keep going and make fast decisions, with imperfect
Yeah.
information.
Oh, that's a wonderful piece of advice. You're right. Some of the smartest people I've ever met, if not all of them, are those that are willing to be vulnerable and ask questions. They're willing to show that they don't know, but that's why they know so much, because when they find themselves in a situation where they're not sure, they ask. And you don't even have to be specific about the question, to your point. You don't even have to know what to ask. It's like, I'm just not exactly sure how this works here. And I personally, I'm trying to get better at that, where it's like, I'm not even sure what the question is, but here's the thought that I have. Can you please open up and just like tell me what you're thinking about this topic? And then you just, instead of holding them down to a specific response that you're looking for, it's like open it up to so that you can fully understand more. And I see why now in your interview, like that probably was the benefit, because when you do ask questions, it shows what's going on in your mind and what's important to you. And you showed them, hey, I'm looking to discover, I'm willing to learn.
Yeah. One of the best reps that I ever met, I was working at one of these companies. I remember his first day, or not his first day, but I was in sales training. Like, we'd come in and we'd do a little shtick in sales training. And he asked a question. And like, for whatever reason, I always said after that, I was like, I speak Kevin. His name's Kevin. And he asked this question, and the trainer was like, what? And he asked it again. He's like, he's trying to figure out even how to ask the question and how to put it to,
Yeah.
because yes, these things can be complicated, right? He's trying to ask this question and no one understands it. And then I could tell that he was about to just say, okay, and move on. And then the sales trainer gave a bad response. But he sort of kept at it. Like, and then on his sort of last try and was about to give up, I stepped in. I was like, hang on a second. I think I understand. I was like, is this what you're trying to say? He's like, yes, that's what I'm asking. And I was like, okay. And I explained it and it was whatever. But then a lot of people benefited from it. But he went on to get this territory that everyone said saturated, no growth potential, done. Like, just don't lose any business, please. And he grew it and was one of the most successful territories. And of course, this, as the story always goes, they kept raising his quota. Eventually, he was like, all right, this is ridiculous. I'm out. Yeah, you lose good reps when you just sort of
Yeah. Yeah.
arbitrarily raise quota because you're supposed to do 15% every year. So, anyways, he left, but he was one of the best reps because, and then I saw him when we were in with clinicians all the time, and he was just so genuinely curious. Like, he's had things to sell, but he was just so genuinely curious about
Yeah.
how they did things, why they did things, what made them make these certain decisions, how it worked. Well, what do you mean? Like, well, how are you ordering this? Like, wait, sorry, I
Hmm.
don't understand. Take me through the steps. Who do you talk to? Why do you talk to him? Or when you do that, wait, is the doctor telling you to do that, or do you do that? Is there a reason for it? Genuine curiosity, and he was one of the best sales reps that I've ever met, and he continues to crush it and do really
Right.
well. And it was just that, again, who
Genuine
don't worry about
discovery.
it. Just be curious and ask questions and try to help. Because when you ask questions, you really are ultimately trying to help. Because you can't help if you don't understand.
Yeah.
Wanting to seem smart or have the answers doesn't really help anybody.
Right. What I'm taking from this is like, I mean, I've said it and a lot of people know it. I think generally let me say this. I think over the years, over decades, there's major publications on the best ways to do things. And when it comes to sales, there's like the best way to sell, right? In the 70s and 80s, it was this way, et cetera, et cetera. I think we're in a phase right now where it's all about asking questions and discovering and strategically throwing these questions at the right time. What I'm discovering here is it doesn't have to be so surgical of the questions. It's the general idea of being inquisitive to discover and understand, because the more you can understand, then the more you can serve and support and help find the solution to your customer, because that's all we're doing is helping them find solutions and serving them in that way. But you can't do it through assumption. And even the art of asking a question, a preemptive set or series of questions, means that you came in. It's the same thing as like saying something in a set certain way. Rather, true discovery is just being inquisitive and making sure that you fully understand what's going on. And that's an art that some people are, I think, have a propensity to. I don't want to say they're born with, ask more questions, but you can learn to just, hey, this is a moment where I don't know, and I tend to find myself not wanting to ask or sound dumb or no. Let yourself be vulnerable and ask that question. It'll benefit you at that moment and in the long run, for all those reasons. I think that's huge, man. Well, that's my takeaway from it, at least. Yeah. So that's time for us. I appreciate all the time you gave me. Is there anything else you want to touch on? I don't have any like nifty like ending to my podcast. I don't
Last
have like
question.
the
sort
last
of thing.
question that
Rapid
somebody
fire.
said.
Like,
I don't have a sign off either. Maybe I should get a sign off. Stay
no,
classy in San
it's
Diego.
great. I think you can naturally sort of like wind down. Doesn't have to be like a thing. No, I mean, I really enjoyed the conversation. I think that, healthcare is going to continue to grow. Some ways good ways, some ways bad ways. It's going to continue to be a mess. But like at the end of the day, it's simple. It's a patient who needs care. It's a clinician who's providing it, has the knowledge, sort of context too. It's the people out there who are trying to help give the clinicians the tools they need to provide the best care
Yeah.
for patients. And it can be simple thing. And we've made it highly complex. And you brought in some like systems level thinking things. The system is perfectly designed to deliver the outcomes that it does, and it's true. And it's not hospitals' faults or individuals' faults. It's not whatever's fault. It's just because the system is designed that way, and that's why we get where we get. But within the system, there are great people, and I think they do their best. And people can change systems, so we just stay out there and keep working on it and keep trying to pull on the threads and do the things that we think are going to help the right sort of folks and stakeholders in the whole sort of situation. I think we're on a good path. I think there's a lot broken in healthcare still, and we'll see how it all plays out in the next 50 to 100 years, or at least chipping away at it right now. And for anybody listening who's like, considering a career in device or sales or tech, whatever it's called these days, MedTech, health tech, digital health. I don't even think people say that anymore. It always needs great people to go in there and be genuinely curious and genuinely want to have time for it.
Love it. Preston Alexander, bullish on healthcare, bullish on
That's
MedTech.
Bullish on MedTech.
Awesome,
I'm
man.
bullish on get medical devices again.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And remember, if you or a friend want a job in medical sales, the best place to go is medsalesblueprint.com.